In tractate Pesahim, one of the fascinating points that I find in the structure of the chapter is that the 10th chapter of Pesachim, which talks about the Seder night and the Haggadah, divides into three parts, and each part opens with wine and closes with the Paschal sacrifice. So, the structure really tells you something very important about how the sages viewed this celebration. And when you look at those two, what I find particularly striking is the reason that the Paschal sacrifice is so central to the chapter is quite obvious. And why did wine become such a central feature of the Paschal celebration? And has no basis in the Torah, of course. The Torah tells you about the Paschal sacrifice, the matzah, the maror. These are all front and center in the Torah's description. The Torah also tells you about talking about these different kinds of food, right? The son will ask you, you'll explain to him what this food is all about, and that's a central feature how the Seder is structured. Okay, but weaving this into wine and basically using 4 cups of wine as the central structural feature, 2 cups before the meal, 2 cups after the meal, and every section of the Seder starts off with you pour the first cup, you pour the second cup. The minute you pour the cup, that's your cue to opening that section, and the section will close with actually drinking that cup. Okay, so wine has really become very central, to the point that the very first Mishnah of that chapter, in telling one basically how to begin preparing for the Seder, don't eat too much before the Seder, so you'll have an appetite for the evening meal, or perhaps for other reasons which we won't go into now, and waiting till evening. Okay, and one of the things that is absolutely required for the Seder is that even the poorest person in Israel is supposed to be provided with 4 cups of wine. So you see just how central the Mishnah presents wine as being to the Seder. And one other point that I find particularly interesting is if you look at the very first Mishnah in Pesachim. Okay, now if you go through the first 9 chapters, you're not going to find very much discussion of wine there. Find a lot of discussion of chametz. Okay, you'll find some discussion of Pesach, Matzah, Maror. From chapter 5 to 9, we'll talk about how the Paschal sacrifice is prepared leading up to the Leil HaSeder, not including it. Okay, but there's one place where wine, if not explicitly mentioned, is alluded to, and that's the very first Mishnah in Pesachim. Okay, the Mishnah in Pesachim says that when you inspect your house in order to eradicate the chametz, so the only places that require checking are places where a person will normally bring chametz in the course of the year. And then the Mishnah says, well, what about the wine cellar? Why are we checking the wine cellar? And the answer is, well, because people do bring in chametz into wine cellars. And then the Mishnah brings an early dispute between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, how exactly this wine cellar is to be checked. So, I think the Mishnah is signaling us right from the beginning, okay, guess what? It's very important, if you're preparing for the Leil HaSeder, it's very important to make sure your wine is chametz free. Okay, so when you're checking the house, you make sure to check the wine cellar too. And then wine sort of disappears from view until we get to the 10th chapter, and there it is, front and center, in the description of the Leil HaSeder. So
Yeah.
you don't have that many references to wine in tractate Pesachim. But if you look at
Yeah.
how they're placed and what function they play, I would say yes, wine is very, very central to tractate Pesachim.